You know, the worst thing about coming to an end of a series? I gotta find a new one. Let's check out all my if-thens on Fridays or my flashback Mondays. Maybe we'll find a new series in those. One that has 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 books. Here you go. We are at almost the end. So if you could please check out my Star Trek Next Generation recaps on Friday, my If Then videos on Friday, and my Flashback Monday, where we talk about all the books in Romantic Time Book Review magazine. We are finishing up Victoria Thompson's Gaslight series, and then we will have to wait a full year for the next one. Welcome to the D. Louise book series. I'm Christina, Kristina. This is where we read books and talk about books. No special effects going on here. No theme music or anything like that. No fancy schmancy graphics. It's just me reading books, talking books. So we are on book 25. We only have Bedford Street left and Rose Hill. And that will be the end till next year. I have enjoyed the heck out of these books. So, that's a little foggy. Sarah is a midwife. Frank was a detective with the New York City Police Department. Please go check out my other 24 videos on this series that exist. We are also doing James Patterson's Alex Cross series, and we are doing J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood series. Next up is The Thief, and I'll be opening that tonight. So, Murder on Madison Square. So, this lady comes to visit Frank. We don't see much of the Deckers, so I'm not really going to talk about them. We do have a very, very brief visit from Mrs. Ellsworth at the end of the book. I want more Mrs. Ellsworth. I want more Mrs. Ellsworth. And I'm going to do a whole thing on her in a couple of weeks. But anyways, so, Frank has a partner, Gino. Because Frank inherited all the money, he got kicked out of the police department, even though that's what he likes to do. So he opened up his own private investigation, and he's got Gino working for him. Maeve is doing secretarial stuff since Brian and Catherine are getting a little older and don't need 24 care. They're going to school. So Maeve is starting to do some secretarial work and help out in investigations when she's needed. And of course, Sarah helps too. And she's also doing her midwifing stuff too. And because they opened up that maternity home for young ladies who are with child, and then they can stay there for a couple of months or however long after till they get themselves situated after the baby is born. So Sarah's got all that going on. Then we've got Mrs. Ellsworth, the neighbor. We don't see too much of her till towards the end. And I just love that woman to death, and I want to see more of her. So anyways, this woman, Mrs. Alva Bing, comes into Frank's office and says she wants to hire him. She had been with an attorney in the building, and apparently he's a sleazy attorney. Oh, and I will want to preface right now, spoilers! I won't tell you who did it, but I will tell you everything else in the book about the characters, because I love character progression. I love to get to know all the characters. I'm reading it for the characters, for the storyline. So like I said, she comes to ask him to investigate her husband. She wants to divorce him, and the attorney said the only way that could happen is if she could prove adultery. So she wants Frank to do that, and Frank will not do that, so he turns her down. Later that night, Frank, Gino, and Maeve tell Sarah about the visit from Mrs. Bing. Then, apparently, over the weekend, they go to the very first ever, uh, Automobile Show of America. Sponsored by, it's the first ever annual automobile show put on by the Automobile Club of America as the sponsor. And I want to ask, and I asked Google, and I asked the lady, the ALEXA lady, and neither one had a good answer for me. And if my grandparents were alive today, I would have asked them. And I might have asked them when they were alive, but I do not remember. Because my grandparents lived during this particular time period. But I wanted to ask them that if you went to the grocery store in your automobile and every single car in the lot was black, how did you know which one was yours? And there's a few people out there with some smart ass answers who claim that that's why fuzzy dice were invented. And I'm like, I don't think the cars had windshield wipers or rear view mirrors back then. I don't know. So, they go to the show, and at the show, they meet Mr. Alvin Bing, and he makes electric vehicles. And he believes that electric vehicles are the next thing. And Frank Bing brings up some good points about the vehicles that is still true today. There may be a gas station on every corner, but there's not a charging station. And if it takes you can fill up your gas tank in a few moments. But how long is it going to take you to actually charge an electrical car? So that's the pet peeve right there. So, Frank meets Alvin Bing. Maeve they all meet him. Sarah meets the wife. She's in the audience. So they talk to her. And, the next day on the way to work, Frank buys the newspaper because the newsboys are screaming that a millionaire was run over by his own car. And so he gets to the office and he sees that Gina and Maeve already have copies of the other papers, and they're all comparing what they say, and they discover that it was Mr. Bing who was run over by his own vehicle. And at first, they're thinking that maybe, I don't know what it's like. They discuss it here in the book. But just hypothetical current day prep, maybe he left the brake off and got out of the vehicle and it just rolled forward. But further investigation later proves that it was done twice. They rolled him over to knock him down. They backed up and rolled over again. So someone was doing it on purpose. So Mrs. Bing comes to Sarah at home. Sarah had given her card at the auto show when they met. And she wants to hire Frank to investigate her husband's death. And she has a daughter, Pearl, a stepdaughter. There's two girls. There's Carrie and Pearl. I think Pearl is the stepdaughter. And she comes to Frank's office, and she wants to hire him too. And no, she's not the stepdaughter. She is the daughter. Okay. So, everybody's trying to hire them to find out who did the killing. And trying to figure out how to go this. So in the midst of all this, they discover that there's a second Mrs. Bing, Miss Nora Broomfield Bing. And apparently, Alvin Bing had abandoned his wife in a western town, left her with nothing, and took the girl and told the girl that her mother had passed away, and she believed him. And she believed stuff that he said, and because some of the environment that we live in today, and the characters don't get the hint right off. They don't. Sarah is too good to even think of some of these things. But some of the things that the characters say to Sarah and Frank and Gino and Maeve, they don't put they don't make that little jump. I made the jump immediately. That some of this stuff is leading to believe that there was a little bit of incestuous stuff going on. But the parties, it's really complicated. But so they start investigating the murders, and they talk to the first Mrs. Bing, who was abandoned out west. And then Sarah brings up the fact that there may or may not be a problem with the inheritance. Oh, look. I still have to finish. I'm rearranging my bookcase. I got it. If you watch, the other day, I did a Christine Feehan haul, and I have to put all those books up there. So I'm rearranging my bookcase, and I just realized I missed the tops. I missed that space up there. I need to redo that. So, Nora explains how she was abandoned, and Carrie explains how, or is it Pearl? Pearl explains that her father told her that the mother had passed away so that she would not wonder about the mother or would not think that the mother had abandoned them. And a lot of people try to protect people. They find out there's been a couple of other murders in the mix. Somebody else was murdered in the past. And they're starting to put the pieces together as they investigate the case. Then we finally get a visit from Mrs. Ellsworth. And I live for these little chapters. So, where is it now? Oh, I didn't write the second one down. The maid who answered the door greeted her warmly and smiled knowingly, since she was probably the one who had delivered Mrs. Ellsworth's note in the first place. She took Sarah into the parlor where Mrs. Ellsworth and Theda were sewing baby clothes. Mrs. Ellsworth, what a pleasant surprise! Mrs. Malloy. What a pleasant surprise, Mrs. Ellsworth said quite convincingly. Theda just shook her head. Not fooled at all, but she rose to greet Sarah and brought her to sit next to her on the sofa. And Sarah inquires about her health and does a little examination and asks her about the pregnancy and all this kind of stuff. And, so Sarah talks to her and she says, other than that, is anything else bothering you? Oh, just the usual from my dear mother-in-law, Theda says. You mean the superstitions, Sarah guessed? You have no idea how many superstitions there are about babies. I can't even keep track of them, much less try to avoid doing all the things that can be dangerous. And that is only for when I'm expecting. After the baby is born, the list just gets longer. What does she have you doing? Sarah asked. Mostly she has me not doing things. I can't go to a funeral because I can't look at a dead body or step over a grave. I have to be careful around cats too, and I can't look at the moon too long or the baby will be moonstruck. What does that mean? I'm afraid to ask. I can't be frightened by anything because that will mark the baby, and look at this. She reached in her pocket and pulled out something. Is that a sock? Yes, Nelson's sock. If you carry around your husband's sock, you won't go into early labor. It's because she loves you so much, she doesn't want anything to happen to you. I love Mrs. Ellsworth. I love Mrs. Ellsworth. So, to find out who killed Mr. Bing and why, and who may or may not have killed Mr. Lane, and who may have killed Nora, because she eventually gets killed too. So we have a few different murders here. Is it done by the same person? Or is it done by another person? And people confess. Are they confessing because they did do it? Or are they confessing because they're covering up for somebody. It's just awesome. And like I said, we've only got Bedford and Rose Hill left before we have to wait till next year. Woe is me. But please check out Flashback Friday. If Then Fridays. I did an African American Black authors. I did a Native American detectives. I did homicide, FBI, witches, vampires, werewolves, vampires, werewolves, Bridgertons. If you like Julia Quinn's Bridgertons, then maybe you like Joanna Lindsay's Mallory's, Stephanie Lawrence Sinsters, and of course Flashback Monday, which you see is that pile behind me. I'm getting ready to do a Flashback Monday video soon. So, tomorrow actually. So please hit the like and subscribe and let me know I'm doing a good job. And please, if you haven't seen the time travel video, If Then Time Travel, go watch that and then go watch the Julia McQuinn books. I had originally done the Julia McQuinn book scheduled for a Thursday, and the If Then was going to be on that Friday. And I was making this big deal about the fact that I got my own referral on a Friday and then did a flash, went back in time to Thursday to read the book. And things got screwed up, and I ended up doing the If Then Time Travel, ended up being a week earlier. So it was the Friday before and not the Friday after. So that's, I mentioned that every single video. I did that so wrong. This is the first time I've had time to correct it. But if you could please hit the like and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.